I got home and didn't get to hear the whole thing, and he was giggling and snickering and gibbering about how great socialism was the whole time. I mean, it is so creepy that we've got just the general public being completely brainwashed, and there they are selling socialism like it's for the average person, when the ultra-rich have always pushed socialism. The British royalty created it, and then pushed it as a false opposition to themselves to socialize the general wealth, to control society, make people dependent on the state, and to shut down competition. And I have to hear this person gibbering about how great socialism is and being patted on the head by the deceptive operative doing the interview. And to hear Stewart rolling over like a dog on his back, showing his belly in glee that she's creamily smacking her lips. I mean, it is sick. You see, most people aren't just watching TV and obsessed with issues of no significance. They're living in dream worlds where they play out these little fantasy lands, these little dress-up games with themselves about who they are. They never even live. And that's what I found with a lot of actors. They're that way. They're not real people. That's why they're good actors, because they can step in to this imaginary fruitcake world. But here it goes. Google, they report, is now shutting down web pages, including stuff in other countries, when the British filthy, murdering, criminal, pedophile government, involved in every crime you can imagine, just the most sickening, miscreant trash the earth has ever seen, whenever they want it, they shut down the web. And that brings us to the next big, super enchilada that I've got for you that integrates with this article. This is from the Department of Homeland Security press release at Infowars.com. And again, Homeland Security is the cancer taking over America. It's the John Carpenter thing they dig up out of the snow that takes you over and replicates. And they are announcing total global seizure of infrastructure and of all commerce globally. To have a job, to work, and for any country to ship anything to the U.S., they must adopt global standard regulatory systems, which are really already in place, but this just makes it law, and it ties in with Obama signs global internet treaty, worse than SOPA.
Hello, I'm Alex Jones.
By the way, in just the last week, we've gotten 12 new stations, but I was just sent a partial list of these. I want to dig out the Albuquerque station. There's a whole bunch of others before I even plug these. I tell you, it's good to have the problem of getting so many stations. You have to scramble just to promote them all, but wonderful folks out there. So before the hour's over, I'm going to compile, because I know it's 12 stations in the last 2 weeks, but there's like 6 or 7 others. And so will you pull out of that list the ones that aren't on here? Because I noticed that some of them aren't on here, but very exciting. It's a good thing we're on some AM and FM terrestrial stations, because the way the internet censorship's going, people may not be able to get us there soon. Now, this is such a big deal. This is such a big deal. What's happening? Here's a headline. Experts, Google privacy shift will have greater impact on Android users. And then it goes on to basically admit that you're not going to be able to opt out of them location pinging where you're at. That's going to be given to everybody. It's just hellish. And there's going to be so many robberies and so many murders and so many horrible things. I mean, already people don't think and put on Facebook where they live and, oh, look at my new computer, look at my new stereo, look at my new diamond ring, and they get robbed an hour later. And people finding out where you shop and what you do. It is so creepy. So that's just some of the news on that front. And imagine, Google gets everybody addicted to using them and has all this data. And depending on how you read this terms of service agreement, they're talking about linking this new information up with all the old data. And that's what my IT people are telling me that they already noticed a few weeks ago, is that Google was already doing what Facebook's doing. I mean, you go on Facebook and it says, identify this person for security so you can access your Facebook. And it's showing you somebody from high school you went to high school with that you haven't talked to in 20 years. And you're like, how does it know that? I mean, that's happening in this office just to use our Facebook. And what it's doing is it's getting you to give it human intelligence to integrate and to confirm that data. And so it's sourcing data. It's a giant spy vacuum cleaner. And now Google is going to be doing all of this? I am not going to use Google anymore. I've always known it's bad. I've pointed that out. But most even of the proxy servers, proxy sites end up using Google, but they just shield you through the proxy while you're doing it. But I'm going to do more research. We're going to do some special reports in the next few weeks and reviews. But I've got to check with my IT people, and I'm going to check with some outside consultants. I'm going to check with Dr. Stallman, and I'm going to try to talk to Declan McCullough of CNET News, get his take on it. And I'm going to really try to do some real research. Because, you know, I'm an expert on the New World Order and all these systems. When it gets down to little technical things like that, I'm going to do a review. And I'm going to tell you the top 10 alternative search engines. And we're going to launch a Google boycott. It's time. We've been using their systems against them, but they're really starting to clamp down, and we've got to build up the alternatives quickly. Now, continuing again, they're working with the British government to shut down websites that criminal system doesn't want the public to see. Google received 65 requests from government to remove web pages from its database in the first half of the year. The Levinson inquiry has heard. National security was the single biggest category among the reasons cited for wanting pages removed from Google search results, the company's legal director said. It says, who flew from the U.S. to give evidence to the inquiry and media standards, said that Google had complied with the request 82% of the cases. Having heard evidence from the newspaper editors and journalists over the last month, Lord Justin Levinson turned his attention to online news providers to help him address the issue of how best to achieve a level playing field between print and online media when it comes to regulation. See, the newspapers are complaining that they're under total government control. D-notices every day, and the D-notice is secret. I mean, I remember Paul Watson did articles on this that we thought it was a D-notice. When you typed London bombing or bombings in on Google News and on Google Web, our articles were #1 being read by millions of people a day. We couldn't hardly keep the servers up in the weeks after the bombing. And our articles were proving it was a government setup. Well, suddenly we were just delisted on that particular. But Google got tired of just delisting us on particular things. And so it's on. I mean, there you go, total proof. Now, that's nothing. I'm going to explain why all this is coming out in the open now on the other side and what to expect next. Then all the big news on other subjects. Stay with us.
We're on the march.
Against tyranny better start quick and better get intense. The awakening process is ongoing, but then you've got to put that into action because the global crime syndicate is involved in a revolution against our laws, not just in the United States, but worldwide, that have always protected the population from tyranny. Every basic liberty is being assaulted. The out-of-control federal government here in the United States, in Europe, and in the UK, Australia, New Zealand, it's all standardized globally, is assaulting every basic freedom and doubling down against anyone that tries to stand up against it, even in a mild way. Because the crooks know they've got to fully dominate us and keep us down. It's like that line from A Bug's Life. In fact, try to cue that up if you can. It's A Bug's Life. Grasshopper talks about keeping the ants down. He says, if you let one of those little ants stand up, 1,000 might stand up. And so it's not about food. It's about dominating them and letting them know we're the boss. Because the grasshoppers are all sitting around going, boss, who cares about that little ant standing up to you? Let's just stay here and pig out on all this grain. And he's like, oh, you're not worried about one little ant. He throws one grain at him. And and it bounces off his chest. And he goes, no, see, it's no big deal. And he goes, how about another one? No big deal. And he pulls a lever and dumps a big container of grain on him that basically crushes him. And he says, how about that? How about 1,000 of them? And so they're sitting around going, how do we federalize America? How do we train people to let us forcibly inoculate them? How do we train people there's no Fourth Amendment? How do we get rid of the Bill of Rights and Constitution? How do we get rid of the 10th Amendment and train everybody to have the military on the streets and domestic checkpoints? Well, we'll just start having drills everywhere. And we'll get the Boy Scouts involved and have them in the community helping hunt for guns. And when we start doing it in 1995, that's the earliest we found it, with the Boy Scouts, we'll say it's for overseas. But by 98, we'll admit it's for America. We do have cases in 87 of Marines dressed up in Army and Army dressed up in police uniforms raiding gun shops. We've confirmed that in Norfolk, Virginia, and other areas. So they're very quiet, secret operations at first, just to beta test and commit the crime of federal troops involved in America. I mean, it's a serious crime, or was a crime, and then to just slowly beta test, slowly learn. And now, in the month of January and February, there are more than 100, Steve Watson did an article on this yesterday, 100 giant U.S. Army drills and Marine Corps drills inside U.S. cities, locking down entire areas. And you're, of course, seeing it announced in your town. And I've been at these. I mean, they'll have troops walk over with guns and say, turn your camera off. They will then suddenly go live and set up checkpoints on highways and pull you and your family out. I mean, it is so sick, just like Katrina. And they're just getting all the cops ready, all the military ready. They're finding out who speaks out, putting them in a file. Okay, you're getting rotated to DU cleaning of tanks. You're getting sent to Afghanistan, boy. You don't like pulling that family out of that car? You're going to wonder in a month why you get sent to Siberia. It's the old joke. And then they're just building their army of wicked people that'll do this. Now, most of the military that are saying they will fire on citizens are not evil. They're very, very stupid. It was about 3 years ago. I was in New York, and I ran into, repeatedly, I had regular Army and National Guard run across the street at me when I'd videotape them and yell and cuss and threaten to physically attack me. It's in my film Endgame. And I'd bowed up and just said, go ahead, do whatever you're going to do, you traitorous scum. They had, you know, their guns on their hips and everything. And then they would kind of freak out. And then the cops would come over, and then their commander would say, no, you know, it's not time yet. But I noticed that in a lot of cases, they were total gangbanger types, or it was very sad. I know that they must have, I'm not trying to be mean to folks because it's very sad, you know, this, when this happens, but definitely some of the troops I would go up to and talk to in the subways had some type of chromosomal problem. You could see them, they look different. In fact, I ran into two guys that I guess the military must allow a certain type. I know there's a lot of different chromosomal problems, but they looked the same, and they had speech impediments. And there's no way they had above 75 IQs. And so they've also, I guess, they figure it's